All right, I got a fresh black and white copy and a colored photo. So I printed off a second one of these because it helps me to see the value, how dark and how light without the distraction of the color, but it doesn't have all of my lines on it because they were covering up some of the detail, and now that I'm starting to add more detail, they got a little bit distracting and confusing. And I print off the color because when you print in black and white, a lot of the time it gets a little bit flattened and you lose a lot of detail just because of the quality of the printer. So now I have all three so I can compare back and forth as needed. I also need to sharpen my pencil. Okay, so this is her eye line that I drew earlier that follows the curve of her face. This is a horizontal from the outside corner. So I can see that the inside corner of this eye, with the way her face is angled, is actually just a little bit taller. So this little divot in the inside corner is higher than the bottom curve. The highest point of her eye is a little bit to the left of center of the eye, I mean. So this is about the highest point, and then it starts to slope down. This is a mechanical eraser, is all. Her pupil, sorry, not her iris, about there. Now, the iris is a circle, so if I were to continue this, it should form almost a perfect circle, but it's partially covered by the eyelids. You can't always see the entire iris. So be mindful, the circle doesn't always have to be centered perfectly within the opening, but the curve, if you were to imagine continuing it, should be a near perfect circle. And the same goes for the pupil. And she's got a slight highlight, a reflection about there and there. Bridge of her nose should be here. She's got a slight bump in the shape. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what's going on right here, so I'm going to leave that alone for the moment. Okay, it's at this point that I'm noticing that this eye is way more done than this eye. So I'm going to hit pause here and start figuring out what this eye is doing now that I know where the bridge of the nose is. About the center line of this eye, if I'm going horizontal to the bottom of my page, is roughly the bottom edge of this eye. And this eye, the corner of the eye is either actually looks about perfectly horizontal with the base until you get back to where it curves. And then it curves pretty dramatically, but not a huge distance. Top of this eye is about even with this crease of the eyelid. Is that right? No, it's below that. It's about halfway. It actually kind of plateaus and then goes down a steep angle. You can see a shadow here, or a highlight here, the bottom rim of that bottom eyelid, but then there's a shadow in the corner. That's real dark. You see right here, there's a bit of a shadow that kind of forms a shape. And then right here, there's another one. So look for where things connect and how they blend into one another. That is the tricky part, but it's also what makes it believable as a real person. Those artists that do photorealistic portraits and drawings, paintings, those kinds of subtle details, that's what they are paying careful attention to. When you get to the eyebrows, I suggest sharpening your pencil, and it's just layering in the texture. It's essentially hatching, though a little less regular than, and where it's darker, you just layer in more. Eyelashes can be tricky. You don't want to get too detailed with them because unless you're doing like a hyper photorealistic picture where everything is in super high focus with really sharp contrast, you can't see all the details of each individual eyelash. So just kind of summarize them and be sure that the lower eyelashes are not coming straight out of the eyeball. They come from this ledge of the lower eyelid. Okay, now you've probably noticed that I have not done anything to the ear since I first kind of marked where it was. Honestly, that's because I don't like drawing ears, so I tend to avoid them. It's not even necessarily that I don't like drawing them because they're a pretty interesting challenge. I think I have more fun drawing the other parts of the face, so I get kind of fixated on them. But that's something to guard against. But now I can't really ignore it or avoid it anymore. So if this is where the jaw meets the ear, bottom of the lobe is about even with the mouth. So the bottom of the lobe should be about there. That was my eyeline. This is my half page mark. So a quarter of the page, about there, an eighth, 1/16. The ear. The darkest part of her hairline there. And then there's a lighter part where there's kind of wispy baby hairs, I'd guess. Can't really see that much detail in the photo. Constantly be comparing things because I just about made this little highlight, that part that some people get pierced, I don't remember what it's called right now, way too high and way too small. See, it's this right here. I just about made it this little tiny. Getting a little confused about what I'm just going to some of this dark shadow that I know is here. at certain points in the portrait. Like in the photo, sometimes it's hard to tell exactly what's going on. That's okay, just as long as it's close enough, your brain will fill in the missing information. Your brain automatically looks for patterns. That's why you can see pictures in the clouds, because your brain is looking for those patterns. Okay, now a lot of you are probably wondering why I just smudged out a lot of highlights that I had created. And the reason is because looking at my photo, I realized that the ear is, the lobe is pretty bright and this part right there is pretty bright, but overall, the ear is darker than the rest of her face. And I need to maintain that. Like this part of the ear right here is much brighter than the rest of the ear, but it's still dark compared to the rest of her face. Remember, you can draw with your eraser too. It's a tool for mark making, just like your pencil is. It's not just for fixing mistakes. It's not an undo button. Okay, I'm having a hard time getting this as dark as I want it right here, so I'm going to grab a softer pencil. I've got a 6B pencil right here. So 6B, B stands for blackness or boldness, so it's a much softer lead. It's more black, it's less hard. Like 6H, that would be a very hard pencil and not nearly as black, much more gray. And I'm not pressing nearly as hard as I needed to on that one to get just as dark or darker of a value. This is when that 6B pencil really comes in handy, dark value. Oh, I figured out what's wrong. Her chin is too far. The point of her chin is too far over. And then that shadow